Okay. Welcome to, wow, we're on part 9. This is a long series. Part 9 of knowing your enemy, and also to fight battles successfully. But it's really about knowing our enemy, knowing what the enemy is behind, so that we have full awareness of how the enemy operates and what the enemy is responsible for in our own lives and as well in the world and things going on around us. So last time, excuse me, last time I actually talked about, just trying to, just give me a moment here. Okay, so last session, I did an intro on the occult after wrapping up on sexual immorality. And I want to correct something that I said that didn't really come out right, just so there's no misunderstanding. I mentioned that man is a two-part being, but that's not what I was trying to say. I was attempting to say that man is composed of two entities, male and female, as it is written that God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. And then it says male and female, he created them. So man, the species, for lack of any a better word, is composed of male and female. So I just wanted to correct that. And we also know that God created us as a three-part being, that being spirit, we being spirit, having a soul, and living within the body. Now, concerning the occult, which is directly connected to the worship of false gods, also known as deities, also demons, we saw how God warned Israel to have nothing to do with such, as those practices involve the seeking of demonic entities for knowledge and power, that we are only to seek from God, the creator of all things. So I want to go back and define the occult. So the occult is specifically defined as any practice that tries to gain supernatural power, abilities, or knowledge apart from God. And I took that from BibleStudy.org. And these occult practices are listed specifically in Deuteronomy 18:12, which we'll look at. And I went through last time and defined these terms that we will see in Deuteronomy 18 in more detail, and I will define them in this session as they come up in scripture that we'll be looking at. So let's go back and look at what God says in Leviticus and Deuteronomy about these occult practices. Starting with Leviticus chapter 19, verse 26, and this is in the Amplified. God said, "You shall not eat anything with blood, the blood, nor practice divination." And here it defines as using omens or witchcraft or soothsaying. And then jumping down to verse 31, God says, "Do not turn to mediums who pretend to consult the dead, or to spiritists who have spirits of divination. Do not seek them out to be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God." And I just want to read what the New King James Version says in verse 31, because they use slightly different wording in the New King James. So just waiting for this to load up. So here in verse 31, it says, give no regard to mediums and familiar spirits. I'm going to have to jump back because it went to the top. Let's see. Okay, so here it says, give no regard to mediums and familiar spirits, which is a more common term than spiritists. Do not seek after them to be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God. And then I want to go to Leviticus chapter 20 and verse 6. Where God says, and the person who turns to mediums and familiar spirits to prostitute himself with them, I will set my face against that person and cut him off from his people. And now Deuteronomy 18, where God lays out in more detail specific occult practices, starting with verse 9. And this is the Amplified we're looking at. It says, when you enter, he's talking to Israel, of course, in these verses. He says, when you enter the land with which the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not learn to imitate the detestable practices of those nations. So these are things that the other nations would do. There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or daughter pass through the fire as a sacrifice, one who uses divination and fortune telling, one who practices witchcraft, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who casts a charm or a spell or a medium, we've seen that again, or a spiritist, or as the New King James Version says, familiar spirit, or a necromancer who seeks the dead. For everyone who does these things is utterly repulsive to the Lord, and because of these detestable practices, the Lord your God is driving them out before you. Now here he includes God includes child sacrifice to false gods or demons, as we know they are, with the occult. He includes it with the these other occult practices, as these nations did all of these things. And it says that these things are repulsive to God. And excuse me, this was man consulting with and doing the work of demons, fallen angels, evil spirits. And in reality, this was man working against God with his enemies. You know, that Satan is God's enemy, and so are the angels that fell with him, and so are these other evil spirits, which we talked about, and I'll mention again later. Now let's look at some more verses on this in 1 Samuel chapter 28, verses 3 through 19. Once it loads. Okay. And this is with King Saul after he sinned, and God was going to take away the kingship that he gave him over Israel. Let's see. Okay. Verse 3. Now Samuel, who was a judge and also a prophet back then, had died, and all Israel had lamented for him and buried him in Ramah in his own city. And Saul had put the mediums and the spiritists out of the land. Here we go with the mediums and the spiritists now. Then the Philistines gathered together and came and encamped at Shunem. So Saul gathered all Israel together, and they encamped at Gilboa. When Saul saw the army of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. And when Saul inquired of the Lord did not answer him, either by dreams or by Urim or by the prophets. Then Saul said to his servants, "Find me a woman who is a medium, that I may go to her and inquire of her." After God told him to put them out and to have nothing to do with them, because he couldn't hear from God at this point, because God had turned himself against Saul for his sins. And then it says, and his servant said to him, "In fact, there is a woman who is a medium at Endor." So Saul disguised himself and put on other clothes, and he went, and two men with him. And they came to the woman by night, and he said, "Please conduct a seance for me, and bring up for me the one I shall name to you." Then the woman said to him, "Look, you know what Saul has done, how he has cut off the mediums and the spiritists from the land. Why then do you lay a snare for my life? Because they will be stoned for doing this, to cause me to die." And Saul swore to her by the Lord, saying, "As the Lord lives, no punishment shall come upon you for this thing." When the woman said, "Whom shall I bring up for you?" And he said, "Bring up Samuel for me." When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice. And the woman spoke to Saul, saying, "Why have you deceived me? For you are Saul." And the king said to her, "Do not be afraid. What did you see?" And the woman said to Saul, "I saw a spirit ascending out of the earth." So he said to her, "What is his form?" And she said, "An old man is coming up, and he is covered with a mantle." And Saul perceived that it was Samuel. And he stooped with his face to the ground and bowed down. Now Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" And Saul answered, "I am deeply distressed, for the Philistines make war against me, and God has departed from me and does not answer me anymore, neither by prophets nor by dreams. Therefore I have called you, that you may reveal to me what I should do." Seeking counsel. Then Samuel said, "So why do you ask me, seeing the Lord has departed from you and has become your enemy? And the Lord has done for himself as he spoke by me, for the Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hand and given it to your neighbor David, because you did not obey the voice of the Lord, nor execute his fierce wrath upon Amalek. Therefore the Lord has done this thing to you this day. Moreover, the Lord will also deliver Israel with you into the hand of the Philistines. And tomorrow you and your sons will be with me," saying that he was going to be killed along with his sons. "The Lord will also deliver the army of Israel into the hand of the Philistines." So I want to define medium, spiritist, and familiar spirit. So a medium is defined as a person claiming to be in contact with the spirits of the dead and to communicate between the dead and the living. And we'll find out what they're really doing. And then a spiritist is basically the same as a medium, a person who claims to speak with or for the spirits of the dead. Excuse me. And then, and I will put this up as well because I have the definitions here. Put this up on the screen. Okay, and so then a familiar spirit is a spirit or demon that serves or prompts an individual. I think it's more so a matter of them prompting an individual rather than serving an individual. And the idea literally refers to demons that are close or familiar to a person, such as a medium or sorcerer. And in this particular instance where Samuel's spirit was called up, his actual spirit was called up, I believe that God was allowing this because when they conjure up the dead, it's usually not that person. But in this instance, I believe that God allowed for Samuel's spirit to come up, and this being like a one-time thing only. But otherwise, they were always dealing with evil spirits and never the spirits of those who they supposedly conjured up, whatever person that they were, that someone would come to them to conjure from the dead. So it was always an evil spirit pretending to be that dead person and not the actual spirit of that dead person. Okay. Now I want to go to 2 Kings chapter 17, verses 15 through 17. And I want to look at the Amplified version. And then switch to the New King James Version. Okay. So here they're talking about Israel. It says, okay. Okay, here we go. It says they rejected his statutes, God's statute and his covenant, which he made with their fathers, as well as his warnings that he gave them. And they followed vanity, that is, false gods, idols, and became vain, empty-headed. They followed the pagan practices of the nations which surrounded them. Although the Lord had commanded them, they were not supposed to do that. They abandoned all the commandments of the Lord, their God, and made for themselves cast images of 2 calves, and they made an Asherah idol and worshipped all the starry host of heaven and served Baal. They made their sons and their daughters pass through the fire as human sacrifices and used divination to foretell the future and enchantments. And they sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger. And in the same way, we as Christians are not to be like the world. Like Israel was not to be like the nations around them and be enticed to do things that are of the world, as they were enticed to do the things that the nations did, that they that God had them removed from the land that they were taking over. Then let's look at, oh yeah, I wanted to look at verse 17, the wording in verse 17 in the New King James Version. And I'm wondering why I wanted to look at it in the New King James Version. Because I didn't see. Let me see. Verse 17. Okay. Well, I'm just going to read it anyways. I don't remember what the difference was from this one and the last one. Let me see if I can just see right here. They made this. Okay, so this. Okay. Okay, just the wording is slightly different. Like here it says that they practice witchcraft and soothsaying, whereas the AMP version says that they use divination to foretell the future and enchantment. So just the wording, the different wording that's used in each, which they mean just about the same thing. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to 2 Kings chapter 21 and verses 1 through 7 about King Manasseh and what he did. So it says Manasseh was 12 years old when he became king, and he reigned 50 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Hephzibah, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord according to the abominations of the nations whom the Lord had cast out before the children of Israel. For he rebuilt the high places, those are places of pagan worship, which Hezekiah his father had destroyed. He raised up altars for Baal and made a wooden image as Ahab, king of Israel, had done, who had also done all these wicked things. And he worshiped all the host of heaven and served them. He also built altars in the house of the Lord, of which the Lord has said, in Jerusalem I will put my name. And he built altars for all the host of heaven in the courts of the house of the Lord. And the host of heaven, I'll just say here, they are the sun, the moon, the stars, and the planets. So that's the host of heaven. And then it says he also made his son pass through the fire, practiced soothsaying, used witchcraft, the occult, and consulted spiritists and mediums. This is what he practiced. He did much evil in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger. He even set a carved image of Asherah that he made in the house of which the Lord had said to David and to Solomon his son, in this house and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, I will put my name forever. So we see the word here, soothsaying, in verse 6. And soothsaying is the act of foretelling events, future events. Pulling that up here. And then we see witchcraft. And witchcraft is the same as sorcery, which I'll define. It's the practice of magic, basically. And sorcery here in the Old Testament is the Hebrew word kashath, which has the base meaning of the word. Well, the base meaning of that word means to whisper a spell, to enchant, or to practice magic. So sorcery, witchcraft are like interchangeable. And then it's defined also as the use of power gained from the assistance or control of evil spirits, especially for divining. And we'll see what divination means. And then the Greek word for sorcery is pharmakia, which is the use of medicine, drugs, or spells, which I will go into detail on later, not this session though. I mean, I'll mention it again, but I'll go in more detail probably in the next session. So if you're worshiping like Manasseh did and some of the other kings of Israel, if you're worshiping these false gods, of course you're going to consult them and do things their way, the false gods being as the Bible has called it, these false gods are demons, which are fallen angels, evil spirits. Now, understand this, Manasseh was, they were people, have been consulting fallen angels for knowledge and power, who have been cursed. These fallen angels have been cursed and condemned by God, who created them and us all. And it makes absolutely no sense when you see it from a clear and right perspective for man who's made in the image of God to worship a fallen angel that God has cursed and condemned. That's, if you're seeing it from a right perspective. And most the people that were doing this, of course, weren't seeing that from a right perspective, nor people today who are involved in the occult seeing it in that way. But it doesn't make sense when you look at it in that perspective, which is the right perspective. And to do so is to be given over to a debased mind, as Paul states in Romans 1:28, that God gave people over to he gave people over to a debased mind and allowed them to just do things that just did not make sense, that were illogical according to his order and his way of doing things. And so God made us like him. He didn't make the angels like him. And so to be involved in any of these kind of practices just kind of devalues who we are as God has created us. Okay, so we're going to move on to Isaiah chapter 8, verse 19. Whenever it comes up. And I did mention, let's see, so here we are, verse 19. Amplified version, it says it might, let me wait, it's not done loading. Yeah, okay. Okay, so when the people, instead of trusting God, say to you, consult the mediums who try to talk to the dead, and the soothsayers who chirp and whisper and mutter, that meaning potential whispering of spells or whatnot. Should not a people consult their God? Should they consult the dead on behalf of the living? So he's pointing out how foolish that is for people to consult mediums who try to talk to the dead on behalf of the living, and instead of trusting God. And like I said before, they are not actually in contact with the so-called dead person, but they are in contact with those familiar spirits, which are demons, evil spirits. And I know of people personally who have claimed to have seen and heard from the dead, but these are evil spirits deceiving them so that people will entertain them. You got to be careful. They are being deceived. And when people die, they go to one of two places. They don't stay on the earth. They don't remain in the earth. The only disembodied spirits in the earth are the spirits of the Nephilim, as I mentioned when we were talking about them. The spirits of the Nephilim, which are the giants, the offspring of the angels called watchers, and women. Those are the only disembodied spirits in the earth. Aside from them are the other fallen angels. And I would say if we know anyone like this that claim to see and hear from the dead, we need to pray for them and let them know the truth, because they're entertaining evil spirits unbeknownst to themselves. Even if, I mean, it may not be met nicely by, that person or those people, depending on, their personality and depending on how deep they are in connection with those evil spirits. Okay, let's look at Jeremiah chapter 14, verses 13 through 14 in the New King James Version. I'm sorry that these pages have to load. I specifically try to preload them so that they're just ready to go, but I guess I took too long to get to them and now they have to like reload. Takes a little time. Slightly inconvenient, but it's all right. All right, so let's start with verse 13. This is Jeremiah speaking, the prophet Jeremiah. He says, then I said, Lord, behold, the prophets say to them, you shall not see the sword, nor shall you have famine, but I will give you assured peace in this place. These prophets are speaking to the children of Israel. And the Lord said to me, the prophets prophesy lies in my name. I have not sent them, commanded them, nor spoken to them. They prophesy to you a false vision, divination, a worthless thing, and the deceit of their heart. And we should know that Jesus warns of not only Jesus, but also Paul, potentially Peter. But in the New Testament, it does warn of false prophets in these days. And that, they would even try to deceive the elect, the children of God, meaning that they will potentially deceive some of us because that's how deceptive they are. But we are warned of to not be deceived and to point them out by their fruit, to discern them by their fruit. And so I want to define divination. So divination is the art or practice that seeks to foresee or foretell future events or discover hidden knowledge, usually by the interpretation of omens or by the aid of supernatural powers. It's like prophecy, but it's not from God. So it's not God prophecy. So that means it's a lie. There's nothing true about it. And then it's also defined as the communication with a deity for the purpose of determining the deity's knowledge, resulting in a clarification of a decision or discernment of the future. And we know these deities are just nothing but fallen angels. And it's also, so it said that the idea of seeking divination has the idea of seeking the gods, these fallen angels, to gain secret or hidden knowledge. And of course, that is still going on today. And I'll talk about that next session, how that's still going on today. And then let's move to, gotta watch my time too. Let's move to Zechariah chapter 10, verses 1 through 2 in the Amplified. All right. So Zechariah's speaking here says, "As for rain from the Lord at the time of the spring, of the spring rain, it is the Lord who makes the thunder clouds, and he will give them showers of rain, grass in the field to everyone. For the teraphim," says, "household idols, speak wickedness, emptiness, worthlessness, and the diviners see lying visions and tell false dreams. They comfort in vain. Therefore, the people wander like sheep. They are afflicted and suffer because there is no shepherd." They're looking to these worthless idols. So when I looked up the term teraphim, because that was a new term for me, I had never really, I don't remember seeing this term before, but when I looked it up, I found that they are images connected with the magical rites. Magical, it says. Magical rites, so it has to do with the occult, used by those Israelites who added corrupt practices to, says, the patriarchal religion, basically to whatever God had instituted. Teraphim were consulted by the Israelites for oracular answers. An idol or other image of reverence, it's referred to as, and divination among the ancient Hebrews. Apparently, especially a kind of household god. And it's apparent that they were, or likely that they were seeking these things, seeking the teraphim for rain, as they would, these other nations would worship certain gods because they believed that they controlled nature. So they were likely seeking these teraphim for rain, but God said to ask him, and that he will give it, instead of consulting with worthless idols and people who see lying, lying visions. And I'm sure they were actually seeing something, but it was a lie from the devil, because all the devil can do is lie, because there's no truth in him. And those who were seeing, who were telling false dreams. So God was saying, consult with me instead of these things that are worthless. They're vain. They're not even from truth. They're from a lie. It's a deception. And all they had to do was just seek God, but they took on the ways and the practices of these other nations. And let's go to Acts 16. See how far I can get. I'll probably have to cut this short. I wanted to do more, but I don't want to go too long. Yeah, I'll save. So I might end it. Yeah, I'm going to end it here with this this verse. Acts chapter 16, verses 16 through 24. Oh wait, I don't know if it's done loading. I think I'm okay. Okay, so it happened as we were on our way. I know Well, yeah, I mean, it mentions it later. Who's Paul? This is Paul here, an encounter that he has along with some others. So it happened that as we were on our way to the place of prayer, we were met by a slave girl who had a spirit of divination. Let me see what this note says. It says a python spirit. In Greek mythology, Python, the earth dragon serpent goddess, associated with Oracle of Delphi or Delphi. Okay, so they met a slave girl, it says, who had a spirit of divination, that is, a demonic spirit claiming to foretell the future and discover hidden knowledge. And she brought her owners a good profit by fortune telling. So she made them money off of doing this. She followed after Paul and us and kept screaming and shouting, "These men are servants of the Most High God. They are proclaiming to you the way of salvation." She continued doing this for several days. Then Paul, being greatly annoyed and worn out, turned and said to the spirit inside of her, "I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her." It says as his representative, to come out of her. And it came out at that very moment. So back in the Old Testament time, that she would have been referred to as a medium or a spiritist, but we know she had a familiar spirit. And here's referred to as a spirit of divination. Yeah, so here's referred to as a spirit of divination. Well, and then the note said a python spirit is another term for that. Now, New King James Version says that she was possessed. She was possessed with this spirit. It says it was in her, and that Paul cast the spirit out of her. I'm gonna define fortune telling, since we see that term mentioned here. That's what she was doing. She was making her owner's profit through fortune telling. And fortune telling here is defined. Just want to pull it up on the big screen. It's defined, though, as the practice of predicting information about a person's life. The scope of fortune telling is in principle identical with the practice of divination. Okay, the next thing I was going to go to was the book of Enoch, but I'm going to save that for next time because I'm going to be opening up some more, just a lot more, and going through the book of Enoch. So I'm going to end it there for this session, and then pick that up next time, in talking about how the watchers, those angels that came into women and had the offspring of the giants, how they were responsible for teaching men occult practices. All right, so I will end it there until next time.